I learned a lot about being able to like show up for creativity on demand as opposed to waiting for the creative spark to inspire. And I think that this is the difference between like the amateur or the hobbyist and the professional. Those of us who are doing this for a living understand that you just got to show up on a regular basis. What we have to do is just show up. And then the inspiration, like it's sort of the joke is you don't wait for inspiration to show up. You show up so the inspiration can arrive.
Welcome to GMP, the Great, Glorious, and Glamorous, aka the Going North Podcast, where authors from around the world help you realize that success is tangible. You'll leave with at least one new piece of inspiration or information to help you keep going north. Now let's get on with the show. Today's episode is sponsored by both books, Going North, Tips and Techniques to Advance Yourself, and the follow-up bestseller, Stay the Course, The Elite Performer's 7 Secret Keys to Sustainable Success. Head over to Amazon.com, pick up both books. They are available in a trifecta of paperback, audio, and ebook. Cop all three of both and be on the lookout for another book from yours truly to help podcasters succeed. Now let's get on with today's episode. And today on the highlight reel builder for authors known as GMP, the Great, Glorious, and Glamorous, it's the Going North Podcast. We got another super special, awesome human for you today, courtesy of podmatch.com. That's right, today where podcast guests get to meet podcast hosts. And if they're cool, they're freaking in. And today's guest is cool, the two cucumbers, because she's freaking both. That's right, indeed. She's the peanut butter and the jelly because she's a bookcaster, y'all. She has written books and she's a show host, so she's done both. She can cast the books, y'all. And on top of that, self-proclaimed fairy godmother, as well as one of the few, a very few folks, I'm telling you, the very few masters on the freaking planet, because she's one of the 119 emotional freedom technique international master trainers. So she's one of 119. Like, you know, big that percentage that is. Really, it's really a small one. It's like extra small. It's like smaller than like let's say smaller than Rey Mysterio's pinky toe. It's extra small. It's extra small indeed. And on top of that, she's also creative oracle decks indeed. So she is a boatload of creativity. So let's give it up for the gem herself, the one and only Jennifer Elizabeth Moore. How you doing today, Jen?
Dom, I am doing great. And I am so delighted to be here. It is awesome. Thank you so much for having me. And I don't think I've ever, it's funny. I come from a family where my nephews initials spell out PB&J. So we have a thing in our family of PB&J, but I've not ever been called the PB&J. So very excited, but you picked up on something that goes on in our family, because that is literally what the sort of the name for all the nephews is PB&J.
Oh, this is beautiful. That's right, indeed. It's when you give them the superpower of puns, you get inside of things.
Oh, you do. You do. And I mean, it makes life more fun.
That's right, indeed. When they say pun unintended, well, it's intended. It goes in. But it ain't about puns on the bun. It's about the wonderful Jen. So my goodness, as with all introductions, I'm not allowed to be 89 days long, and I probably only covered 8 seconds of that 89 days. And all that you're doing, it's your first time on the show. So mind giving the listeners a bit of your backstory of how you got to where you are today?
Okay, so let me see. So my name is Jennifer Moore, and I am the author of the book Empathic Mastery, which is a 5-step with the subtitle of a 5-step system to go from emotional hot mess to thriving success. And as you mentioned, I'm also one of the master trainers for EFT International. And in case you're wondering, EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Techniques, which is also sometimes known as tapping. And it is a way to address and clear all kinds of stuff that we're carrying around inside of ourselves and getting us all bajiggity. And so I learned this a number of years ago, and I've been working as a healer and an intuitive for most of my adult life. And when I discovered this modality, I fell so hard in love with it. I was like, I have to learn not only how to do this for myself and to facilitate it as a healer, but to share it with other people and teach them how to be impeccable practitioners too. So I have been a lifelong creative. And one of the things I had sort of pitched to you when I reached out to say, hey, I'd love to be on your show, is that I am what I would call a reluctant writer. I come from a long line of writers. My dad's side of the family were published authors. My grandfather has, I believe, still the distinction of having been the person who's written more sonnets than any other person on the planet ever. Like, he wrote a sonnet a day for years and years and years. And in case you're actually curious, my grandfather's name was Merrill Moore. And he was he was a really interesting guy. He was a psychiatrist and a brain surgeon, like a neurosurgeon, but way back before these things even happened. And he was also this amazing poet. And he hung out with a bunch of like the New England poets. So but his father was a writer and his grandfather was a writer. And I don't, there's a point where you start losing the plot in the family line. But I come from a long line of writers, but I also come from a long line of people who have learning disabilities and, are differently abled. So for me, I grew up, I was always called a chatterbox. I was always called very, very imaginative. But it wasn't until I got much older and I realized how important being able to write and getting things into the form of a book would be. But as a kid, I was a very highly sensitive, intuitive, creative, magical little girl. And I was often being told that I was too sensitive, that I was overreacting, that I was taking things too personally. And it took getting into my adulthood to start to realize that so much of what was going on for me and that was causing me distress was actually not necessarily even mine, but was coming from picking up on and sensing the thoughts, the feelings, the energy, and the sensation from the world around me. And over time, I really came to understand that I am what people would call an empath. And which is not a psychiatric term, not a diagnostic term, but actually comes out of science fiction, but it describes a certain kind of person like me and many of the people that I work with who do pick up the thoughts, the feelings, the energy, and the sensations from the world around them. But unlike somebody who has extrasensory perception abilities, like psychic abilities or or just intuitive, or a medium where they know they're getting information from outside, empaths experience the information as if it's their own. And so that adds a layer of confusion to really being able to sort out what's mine and what's not mine. And so my book, is all about the pretty much like 3-decade journey that I have taken and I took to learn how to recognize what's mine and what's not mine, release the stuff that is not serving me, learning how to protect myself both energetically with sort of bubbling up with those nice filters and shields or the cloak of invisibility that Harry Potter would be wearing, as well as protecting myself in terms of strategies and boundaries, and basically being able to say like, yeah, no mas, not going to happen anymore. And like, yeah, no, not going to do that for you. And as well as then really starting to connect with something greater than myself, because the universe abhors a vacuum. And if we connect with something positive, there's way less room for that kind of negative misery to come in. And then finally, just really learning how to act differently in the world, which part of the acting for me, and I just described the 5 steps of empathic mastery of recognize, release, protect, connect, and act. But that the final one in many ways was really what motivated me to write the book. And then ironically, as this reluctant writer with a love-hate relationship for putting stuff on the page, I've got the second solo book is in the works right now. It's back at my I've kicked it back over to my editor for the time being, and she's kind of combing through it and making sense of it. And then it will come back to me to write some more. But I've also now written 3 chapters in 3 multi-author books. And so at this point, I'm kind of like, I've gone from sort of the maybe I'm an author to being like, yeah, at this point in time, I think it's fair to say I am an author. So long answer. Hopefully I gave you guys a sense of who I am and what I do. Oh, and I will say I work with other highly sensitive, empathic people to learn how to go from taking on all the thoughts, feelings, energy, and sensations from the world around them to actually being able to use their gifts to make a difference in the world. And I do this with one-on-one work, as well as with groups, as well as with, I've got a Facebook, a free Facebook group, and, writing and all that other stuff. So there you go. I think I've laid it all out for you.
There you go. I guess the pun was intended. Making sense for folks who were sensitive. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. That's good, though, and it's definitely good. You're finally able to finally just say, all right, screw it, let's do it. I'm going to put pen to paper, finally gonna write. It's like, hey, it ain't so bad. All right, cool. Let's do it again. Ooh, let's
Let's
do it
do it again. Well, and I got to say, the first book took I started working on the book in 2016, and I did not publish the book until 2019. And it was like a 3-year process. And then I'll be honest, it took me another 2 years to get the audiobook released, which I finally got the audiobook out early, like at the very beginning of this year. So actually, 2 years from writing the book to getting the audiobook, publishing the book to getting the audiobook out. But a lot of this first book, I had to find ways to work with what my friend Joanna Hunter and mentor Joanna Hunter would call it, is a neurospicy brain. And so, like I said, I come from dyslexia. I come from people. I personally, not only an empath, but gene mutations and sensory processing stuff and everything. And so I really had to learn how to find a way to get the thoughts from in here out of me, and then get them onto, into the document so that I could start working with the written word. But when I'm tired, when I'm depleted, pretty much one of the very first things that goes is my ability to make sense of chunks of words. And, I can't really parse, I'm too tired to, it's I can look at it, I could read the words, but they just don't land. There isn't necessarily any retention. So knowing how to find a way to get the words onto the page in a way that allows me to communicate was definitely a learning process.
Definitely a learning process, indeed. So, my goodness, with all of that learning, I guess, what was probably the biggest thing that helped you to really get over that hump, I guess, because we got a lot of folks who are dyslexic nowadays, but we well, if anything, really kind of do have magic with this technology that allows folks to just jump in and still publish anyway.
It's absolutely incredible what's possible. And then there's the other thing. This is kind of a whole aside, but the fact that now we have this entire world of self-publishing where it is no longer a stigma. Like my grandfather, who at this point in time has sort of become kind of like a cult, there's sort of a weird kind of cult following of him as a poet. But when he was alive, he self-published. And I think about, he did so many things that I'm now like, oh my God, he recorded he recorded records of some of his poems, some of his sonnets. He was doing essentially audiobooks back in the 1950s. But he also self-published. But back in those days, it was called the Vanity Press. And there was so much stigma. And I'm kind of like, if you got a book in you, get it out there. And don't give yourself, I hear so many people who have rules about, oh, I have to find a publisher. I'm like, actually, no, you can self-publish. And the irony of it is that I mean, I could go down this whole rabbit hole about the self-publishing versus working with a publisher, but I happened right before I opted to go the route of self-publishing. I happened to be listening to a webinar that Reed Tracy from Hay House was talking about, where he was talking about what you need as a platform in order to be considered for most publishers. And at this point in time, you need to be ready to market your book, and you need to show that you have a platform of like 100,000 subscribers, and like you got like a big Instagram, like you've got the following already. Unlike the days when it was like, if you had a good pitch and a good idea and your writing was good, the publishers were like, they would take an unknown. Now the main publishing houses are looking for people who are already established. And what I had seen as a model was a number of people that I really respected who started by self-publishing, and then eventually, after they built their platform by self-publishing and using their book to establish authority, establish and leverage themselves as an expert, that then they were able to use that and then go to a publisher and everything. So I guess I decided to go down that rabbit hole and talk about that tangent. But going back to talking about like, what did I do? What was I able to do? I know for myself, and you can probably tell that I'm a very, very verbal person. I was called a chatterbox nonstop as a little girl. I was constantly called, like the people, they called me old lady because I had such a big vocabulary. And often if I could use a 3-syllable word instead of a 1-syllable word, I probably was going to use the 3-syllable word, because I love language and I love words and I love communicating. So, but what I know about myself is that I have a much easier time. I am an auditory processor. I'm a verbal processor as opposed to a visual processor. And so what I know is that for me to bring words into and thoughts and concepts into the world, I do way, way better by talking about it and actually responding to prompts and questions than I do just sort of sitting alone with the page and trying to get it out on the page. So when I started to get the brainstorm for my book and get the ideas and sort of pull together 30 years of like trial and error and like, move forward and hit a wall and you go splat, turn left or right. What I did was I created and decided to teach a class, and I invited a bunch of people that I knew would benefit from the class, but also were like people who I already had sort of rapport with. And I had a class of people who took my beta class, and I taught the material. I taught all of the content by speaking it. And I actually did it 2 times. The first time I did a 3-day event where I had been using my social media because I had already established a Facebook page for my business, where I had asked a bunch of questions of my audience, and I crowdsourced questions. I was like, what do you need to know? What are you struggling with? What are the things that are coming up? And so I had a list of all of the questions that the people like me were struggling with. And then I proceeded to essentially teach from the questions and respond and answer the questions. So like one of my assistants would read me a question, and then I would answer the question and I would give that response. And then what I did was, so I had like 3 days of content and material and information. And then I sent it over to somebody who transcribes things. The nice thing is now you don't even have to rely on, if you're willing to do a little bit of combing through, you don't even have to rely on a transcriptionist. Back then the AI wasn't as good as it is now. But at this point, like I love Otter AI as one of the ways to like just, I'll take an audio file and rip it to the written word. And so I did that with this first round. And then the second round, after I sort of had a more clear sense of it, I started to get more of and I worked with one of my a colleague of mine who does, who's a writing coach supporter, where she and I kind of combed through and got the structure of the book and the outline of the book and what was going to happen. And so from the raw material that I basically shared and taught in like June of 2016, then in the autumn of 2016, I had an outline, I had an idea, and then I basically taught it again in a more like clear, organized fashion. And then again, took all of that material, sent it to my transcriptionist, and I had like a lot of content. And so from that, what I did was I personally did not touch it. I sent it over, I kicked it over to another editor, woman who she identifies as a book midwife, my dear friend, Nikki Starcat Shields, who, if you guys are looking for somebody to really help you bringing your books into the world, Nikki is the bomb. And she's magical. She's very magical. She uses writing from a place of like really very intuitive, very magical, really bringing it out. But so Nikki basically took the content, the written content, and she started massaging it and finding the threads and sort of pulling, putting the pieces together in a more orderly fashion. And then she kicked that back over to me, and I got to go in and basically go from, because I handed her the rough. She turned it into sort of a secondary rough draft. I then took that rough draft and I basically sat down, and that's when I really could not use spoken word. I had to just write. But I had to hack it. Like I really had to find ways to trick myself into getting my butt in the seat and just writing. And the universe conspired to make this happen, because I was supposed to have the building that I am in right now completed 6 months earlier than it was done. And so I was in a period where I was in a holding pattern where I could not go forward with some of my business plans and my ideas, because I was waiting for stuff to get done. And it was sort of like the universe is like, you're going to plant your butt in the seat with your computer in front of you, and you are going to comb through this, and you're going to write this book. And so I will say that while there are many hacks that I think we can use, and there are many tricks that can help us to get the book out into the world, and we do not have to do this alone. We just don't have to do this alone. That being a writer is a solitary thing on one level, but it is also, I really am finding more and more, it is very much a community process, and that it really is very collaborative, like that most of us as authors, like and that's one thing I'm loving about Podmatch, is the connection with other authors. And like there's something about being around other authors, like we get each other in a way that other people don't. So I think the idea that you're just like sitting up in the garret and you're alone and you just got to do the writing isn't necessarily true. But there is also just that point where you just got to sit your butt down, get it in the chair, open up the computer, and say, come hell or high water, I'm going to do this. So because of I'm needing some accountability, but also because of my resistance, like the part of me that's just like, I don't want to, what I would do is I would go on Facebook, or, mostly Facebook, because that's where my friends are. I would go on Facebook and I would do a, friends only post where I would say, wish me luck. I'm going in, I'm writing. If you see me here on Facebook, call me out, because for the next 3 hours, I'm supposed to be writing. And I would state that, and I would tag my accountability people. Like I would tag one of the people who was acting as a writing coach and actually a publishing and marketing coach for me. Her name is Diana Needham, and Diana is another like amazing human being. And so I would tag Diana, I would tag like Nikki, I would tag my friend Jillian, who she and I were kind of like accountability buddies around all kinds of stuff. And I would know that these people would know, like they knew I was doing this. And I basically, like, I was calling myself out and saying, I'm going to do this. And if I didn't do it, I would have the embarrassment of not doing it going on. So that was one of the things that I did. But the other thing that I did was I would like use like an essential oil diffuser and put like concentration oils into the diffuser so that I had like smells that were helping me to focus. And I also would run binaural beats, like or solfeggio frequencies that are like, but especially like the, like 428 hertz or like, the different and especially like the concentration sounds. I would have that running on the screen because I would sit often. The way I like to write is I would sit at our couch. I have a lap desk. My computer would be on it. YouTube would be playing these concentration videos. I'd have the essential oils running. My pug would be next to me cuddling up. And then I would just be like, you have absolutely no excuse. You just got to dive in and do it. And that was how, just like one day at a time, over the course of about 2 months, I was able to comb through these basically like all of the chapters because the book has 8 formal chapters, and then it's got like introductions and how to use this book and glossary of terms. So there were a bunch of different sections, and I just sort of slowly but surely just kept on knocking away at it. And that's actually one thing that is both a blessing and a curse about self-publishing, is that you don't necessarily have any deadline. But because of the fact that I don't thrive under deadline, I'm more of somebody who tends to kind of crumble under pressure as opposed to thrive on pressure. And that's something I think is so important to know as a writer. Are you somebody who needs something? Like, I've got a friend, my dear friend, Chris Ferraro, has written a number of different books at this point. She's working on her third, and she's actually amazing. Her story is amazing. She was like did not have a massive platform, and yet got approached and has been picked up by a major publishing house for her books. But Chris wrote a book called Energy Healing, and her next book is called Manifesting. I mentioned Chris right now because Chris thrives on a deadline. Chris basically does not get the book done until the deadline comes up. I, on the other hand, have to have the organic and the room, like the wiggle room in the space, to work through my emotional resistance in order to get there. And sort of like, I have found for myself, it has been really, really, really important to give myself a lot of mercy and grace, and also to have a lot of compassion for all of the resistance that comes up. And I know I'm like not speaking in sound bites here because this is there's just so much about this. But one of the other things I realized that I had to work through was, as a highly sensitive empathic person, as somebody who picks up the thoughts, feelings, and energy that is coming at me. And I think many writers are. I think many writers, many creatives are more sensitive and more aware of things in the world than the average bear. But what I
Yeah.
realized is that we feel the gaze, and we feel it's like there's an engagement between us as the writer and the reader and the people who are engaging with our content. And if you're not aware of the fact that there is that, like, a lot of people talk about the fear of visibility or the fear of being vulnerable or the fear of being judged. But I think there's also this quality of like feeling energy coming back at you when people start engaging with your book and getting it out into the world. And so not only did I have to overcome my own sort of like, I don't like writing, and kind of getting over and also getting over the messages as a child of being told you're lousy at spelling and you've got a learning disability, and this is not, you're a great visual artist but you shouldn't be a writer. That not only did I have to overcome a lot of my own kind of like mishigas about it, I also had to really acknowledge the part of me that felt vulnerable having other people reading and processing my content. So long, long, long answer.
Hey, but hey, a lot of good needles in that wonderful haystack indeed, especially with the Otter.ai for the wonderful audio transcription as well. Just combing through all that material and just the fact that, hey, success happens when you create the climate for it, like making sure you're
Yeah,
in the
the
right
success
area.
happens when you create the climate for it. And like for me, that meant having like woo music on the stereo and like essential oils going. And I actually had another thing because, which is a whole other, but I have this device that broadcasts frequencies called a Rife machine that I discovered because of healing my Lyme disease. But it also has frequencies for concentration and mental focus. So the other thing that I did every single time I would sit down and work on the book was that I would run rifing frequencies for concentration, for memory, for focus, for relaxation and ease, and to allow so I could get my brain and my energy, my body, everything as entrained to succeeding as possible.
Yeah. That's what I'm talking about, Dave. That's what I'm talking about, Dave. So, my goodness, such your fellow podcast co-host, always got to ask an obligatory host question. So, what you consider your three major lessons learned from starting and hosting a podcast of your
Okay, so I'm kind of on a tear right now about pitches.
own?
And so one of the lessons that I have learned by being a podcast host is how many people write really bad pitches, and how many
Amen.
people do not read any of the information about what the podcast is about and send pitches that are like, and then they try to blow smoke up your butt and say things to you that are like implying that they think you're awesome, when it's just like, yeah, you might say that you think that this is going to be a good fit, but you clearly have not read a blessed thing that I wrote, because if you did, you would know I'm not taking new guests, and that I am not working with this, and this, and that you are completely not the right fit. And so one of the things that I've learned about podcasting as a host is that if you are going to be a desired guest on somebody else's podcast, number one, check out the show and find out, like, even the bottom line, find out if the person is only doing a solo show and they're just talking and they don't interview other people. Find out whether or not, but especially find out what do they do and do you actually fit? And then write a pitch specific to the individual. And don't tell me how awesome you are. Tell me why my audience is going to benefit from what you have to say. And so that's one of the big lessons I've been really sitting with, which is just sort of like, and the intersection between, like, in some ways, it's like, I think the best podcast guests are also podcast hosts because we get it. We
Yes.
understand what's involved in doing podcasting, and we get that, we get that process, and that it is not a TED talk. It is not, and it is not a place where you just get to like be like, and then when I did this and I made six figures and I 10x'd in 3 weeks, and here with my program that will help you to do, like, podcasting is not a platform for selling your shit. Podcasting is a place, and the thing is, true podcasters, like, I will also say one of the other things that I've been learning as a podcast host is what a rich, wonderful, amazingly interconnected and supportive community podcasting is. I have made so many friends and connected with so many amazing human beings all over the planet because of podcasting, and that there's something so wonderful about that. And I guess what I would say is, so the sort of the second lesson of that would be just to don't go in with an agenda. Don't go in with a lot of expectations about what, how is and what this is going to do for you. Go in willing to be as raw, as open, as sincere, as vulnerable, and as transparent as possible. And also with the primary focus or desire, intention to be of service and to offer value. And the other thing, I guess I would say, sort of part 3 of this, what have I learned about podcasting, is that podcasting, the results of podcasting are often different than what you think they will be. Like if somebody, for example, is a writer and they want to be on a podcast to promote their book, it is not necessarily that you're going to, go on somebody's podcast and the next day you're going to go on KDP and you're going to discover that like you sold 10 books overnight. Maybe that will happen. That would be awesome. But more likely, what's going to happen is that you're going to make connections with other people and you're going to have an opportunity to collaborate. And you're going to have these opportunities to kind of like, this leads to this and this leads to that. And so what I would say is that both as a host and a guest, I find podcasting to be, it's kind of cumulative. It's kind of like a snowball effect. And that one thing leads to another, and these pieces all kind of tie together, and you start seeing the greater picture. But it is a slow burn and it is a long game. It is not like I've personally been, I started my podcast, the Empathic Mastery Show, on a sort of radio platform. For the first 36 months, I did it on somebody else's platform. And I released 36 podcasts that first sort of season, which I call like beta season. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to take this into my own hands. And I did my second season where I sort of took the reins and started doing that. And I'm now well into my sort of, and I call that the season 1.1. And now I'm in my second full, self-publishing or completely self-directed season. But I've basically done 3 seasons and I'm right now starting to get some traction. Right now, interestingly, my podcast, if I look on, there's a Pod Charts is one of the places where you can find out about like the stats of what's happening with your podcast. Interestingly, I keep on like hitting the charts in Switzerland. So I don't know who it is who's listening to me in Switzerland, but I keep managing to hit like the top 200 for all kinds of episodes for spirituality in Switzerland. But it is a slow burn, and it is consistent, persistent action, just like with writing, that is the necessary key to make it work. And that it is not like if you go into podcasting as a host, thinking that you're just gonna send your show out there and absolutely everybody is gonna like, just everybody and their mom is gonna be like flocking to your doors after that, you're gonna be in for a rude awakening. In the same way that like I've seen this happen with a lot of people, like when they're like going to do their very first Facebook Live, or they're going to do their first YouTube video, or they're going to stream something. And they're so terrified of what are people going to think of them. And I'm kind of like, honey, you got to record literally hundreds of videos before you really get your rhythm and your groove. But you also have got to have a lot of consistency and a lot of critical mass before you actually start getting attention. And so I'm kind of like, I find it funny how so many people are afraid of taking that first step because they're afraid of being judged or being seen or going viral. And I'm kind of like, just get it out there, because chances are it's not going to go viral for a few years if you're lucky. And that it's sort of, and yet so many people stop themselves in their tracks because they're afraid of being judged, or they're afraid, they're worried about how it's going to come across. And it's like, you haven't gotten on the tricycle yet. It's like, yeah, come on, like the first podcast is like, you're just scratching the surface. And I would say the first season of a podcast, it's a learning curve. You're discovering what is necessary. You're discovering how things work. So that's what I've learned, at least for today. My answer might vary tomorrow.
Hey, it's all good. It's a learning journey. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. And we're always evolving. That's right, indeed. Some days we are full tree with the leaves. Some days the leaves are falling. That's right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So, my goodness. So, is there a question that you wish folks would ask you more often when you're on the guest side of the game on a microphone?
Ah, I don't know. I mean, I tend to approach being a guest with this really like fluidity and this like, I just want to meet you where you are and respond to what your audience is looking for. And so I guess I would say, I want you to ask me the questions that your audience wants answers to. I'm not going to presume that I know. And so as a result, I don't actually have a lot of sound bites or a lot of like, oh, you absolutely must ask me this question because it may or may not be relevant for the audience. And so I'm much more interested in you or any of the podcast hosts asking the questions that really draw out the truth that your show needs. So hopefully that wasn't some kind of cop out, like I'm just avoiding the question, but I really am like, no, I actually will also say, I kind of, I have sort of the, the canned questions that podcast hosts can ask me, because, that's kind of formulaic and some podcast hosts want to have the canned questions.
Mhm.
And I do generally suggest if I'm talking about all things empath that we start with like defining the word. I think it's a very useful thing to be sure that we're on the same page. So, what I do appreciate are people asking questions about definitions so that we just know that, like, you and I are talking about the same thing, and I'm not assuming something about you, and you're not assuming something about me. So, I appreciate that, like getting ourselves to have definitions. But I have found that a lot of those canned questions and learning how to speak in sound bites for me is actually incredibly boring, but I also find that it tends to like suck the life out of a podcast. And that, when somebody is just speaking the rehearsed lines that they've said a million times over and over again, there's a lack of creativity, there's a lack of excitement, there's a lack of collaboration, and it's just not as interesting and it's not as fun. So, like I said, I'm much more interested in you and I having a conversation about, like today, about writing and about what it means to get the book into the world and to get the words on the page than I am necessarily about going through the outline of like, canned questions.
Can do. That's right, indeed.
Oh, God.
That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. Canned questions with no context. You love to hear them. Not really.
No,
But
not
hey.
really. Even if they have a context, I mean, even if they have a context, I don't know. And if in your experience as a host, I've had these experiences once in a blue moon. I will have a guest who is really used to like speaking in sound bites, but like saying like they've got like all of their bullet points hit. And what I find is that the host, I'm much more likely to be struggling to come up with the next question because it's almost like there just isn't a lot of room for that. There isn't as much creativity. I don't know if that's your experience as a podcaster.
I have noticed that sometimes I try to veer them off into some new stuff they haven't mentioned in the past interview I've heard of them, and they end up redirecting it back to whatever they had in mind. It's like, dang gummit, I
Well, and
had
I
you.
mean, I'm sorry, but aren't authors supposed to be innovative and creative and like showing how they can, like isn't there supposed to be a certain amount of spontaneity and like the creative muse that like comes through? Like
Yeah,
it's not our greatest hits.
yeah, yeah. Yep, it's true. It's
Yeah.
definitely true indeed. That's right. Not everybody can be Hall and Oates, release the
No,
same songs every 3 years on
same song.
CD.
And this is kind of a complete tangent, but I worked for 20 years as a tattooer and I did it as a healing art. And I had
Oh,
and it was a dream job. It was a total dream job. It was like I was so excited to be able to do this. And about 2.5 years into the career, I realized it was a job. And that even when you have a job that you absolutely love, when you're doing something that you really, really, really want to do, there is still a lot of just like getting up, getting your butt in the car, getting your butt into the office or into the studio and doing the things that need to be done. And no career, even your dream career, doing the creative thing that you want to do, is going to be like sunshine and unicorns and like soft serve ice cream 24/7. It's not all rainbows. It's not all fairies. It's not all gossamer wings. It's like there is a whole lot of just the willingness to be willing to just keep showing up, get your butt in the chair, clean up your mess after you're done with it, set up in the beginning of it, wake up and do it over and over again. And I learned a lot about being able to like show up for creativity on demand as opposed to waiting for the creative spark to inspire. And I think that this is the difference between like the amateur or the hobbyist and the professional. Those of us who are doing this for a living understand that you just got to show up on a regular basis. Now, certainly, like if you're sick or if there's been a death in the family or you're just having one of those ghastly days, take a break, give yourself space. But that is really different than waiting for inspiration. What we have to do is just show up. And then the inspiration, like it's sort of the joke is you don't wait for inspiration to show up. You show up so the inspiration can arrive. And that was something that I really discovered. But about, 2.5 years into my career as a tattooer, the movie Rockstar with Mark Wahlberg came out. And I love that movie so much because it was about a, small town boy from the Midwest who had this band that was like absolutely his like rock star hero band. And he was like, had a tribute band for this group. And his fantasy was to be the lead singer of this group. And then basically the plot is that the lead singer ends up basically leaving the band for various reasons, and he gets hired to become the lead singer. And what had been this dream life fantasy for him, suddenly he discovers like he's like a year into the touring circuit and he has no idea what city he's in, and he's singing the same damn song over and over and over and over again. And so, you talk about Hall and Oates, and it's like that movie had me realizing, I was like, oh my God, could you imagine what it must be like to be a musician where you've got this set of greatest hits and all of the audience wants to hear your greatest hits that you did like 30 or 40 years ago. And the entire room is expecting you to deliver it fresh and new because they've never, for them, this is like a really new experience. When for you, it's just like, yep, I'm singing like Happy Together again for like the 300th time this year alone. And if I compound that by the fact that I've been doing this for 30 years, we're talking thousands and thousands and thousands of times of showing up and doing this thing. So I share this just because for me, that movie was so freeing because I had a lot of fantasies about what the creative process is like and a lot of ideas about how fun it is. And the truth is that when you go for your dream job, while it is absolutely soul fulfilling and nourishing and wonderful, it is a job. And there will be a lot of things that you're just going to need to be willing to show up for, and not just because it's fun and you just want to play.
That's what I'm talking about indeed. That's what I'm talking about indeed. And hey, yeah, that's all none of the good stuff of play. As long as you're playing for the sake of playfulness indeed.
Mhm.
Along with the playing as a rock star if you have to. That's right indeed. Even if it's all at a local bar. That's right indeed. Getting you started.
Get your start on. Get your start on. I mean, that's a whole other thing. Just, and I really do believe that if there's anything that I have learned over the years, and it's like showing up is like the biggest thing. But showing up does not mean that you're going to become an overnight sensation. Like you got to keep showing up, keep showing up, keep showing up, keep showing up, keep showing up. So often it's like, it's like, what is that saying? Overnight sensation in 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. It happens overnight, over many nights.
Over many, many nights. Yeah.
Exactly. You don't even know when the heck that big night's gonna show up. That's why I got to
No
keep showing up.
idea. Well, and the other thing is, the idea that we have in this culture that there's going to be the one epiphany, there's going to be the one like pivotal moment in our life that everything's going to go viral and it's all going to turn, everything's going to shift. And I think that's a really unfortunate perspective about the world because, slow and steady and incremental is the way that we get to where we need to be. And even with like oh my God, if I could just get on this podcast, oh my God, if I could just get the attention of this person, if Oprah would just bring me on her show and endorse me, then I'll be all set. And what I will say is that in my experience, and I've yet to be on Oprah, but in my experience, what I have found is that while there have been certain things in my life that have been, as I look back at them, I'm like, this was a pivotal moment in my life where everything changed as a result of this. More often than not, the things that I thought were going to be like, now I've arrived, it was just another step along the journey. And I guess what I would say, if you are a writer, for the writers listening to this, if you are a writer, it's like, it's so important to love the whole process and to love the craft and to embrace all of it because it is not about that one pivotal experience. It is a lifestyle that builds like one thing after another and builds on itself.
Ah, that's right, indeed. It builds on itself, indeed. Well, speaking of building, got to build your strength up sometimes through eating. So, if your wonderful book, Empathic Mastery, if it was a food, what would it be and why?
It feels like it's a meal. And I would say like it's for some reason, maybe because we're coming right up on Thanksgiving right now, I sort of have this image of like it's like a grass-fed turkey, from my friends from my friend Chase's homestead. My friend Chase makes has the best turkeys I've ever had in my entire life. It is something that has taken time. It is something that is nourishing. It is clean water. It is grass-fed protein. It is green juice that sparks up your brain. And it is a little bit of chocolate that is, sweetened with something that doesn't send you over the edge. Because one of the things that I actually write about in the book is how sugar so frequently really discombobulates and throws sensitives off, and how it's really important to actually like really be mindful, if not abstain entirely from processed sugar. So I will not say there's anything sugary in this, except for possibly like, I don't know, let's say it's a turkey, it's a green salad, it's a big thing of water, it's a shot of green juice, and it's a persimmon, because it's persimmon season and they're just so magical and delightful and amazing and interesting. And it is like the best artisanal coconut nectar sweetened chocolate that you can find.
That's what I'm talking about, dude. That's right, indeed. The whole meal. That's right, dude. That's right, indeed. That's right. All the stuffing. That's right, indeed. From
All the
grass fed
stuffing.
to.
Yep. Yeah.
That's right, indeed. Right, indeed. Feed your mind, feed your soul. That empathic mastery. That's right,
Mm-hmm.
indeed. You'll get to figure out. Oh, shoot, I'm sensitive. I finally had this confirmation. Oh, here we go. Some magical, concrete steps I could take to really tap into my six-path empath abs. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. That's right,
Right,
indeed.
indeed, absolutely. I want to say something you just said is that one thing I've been discovering is that because so many of us grew up in families where we were told we were too sensitive, that we were overreacting, that we were taking things too personally, that we had an overactive imagination, yada, yada, yada. What I've found is that there are so many people who do not necessarily identify as highly sensitive or empaths, because they were so invalidated and gaslit as kids. But what happens is you pick up the book and you start reading it, and then you go, oh my God, this is me. This is me. This is me. This is me. And so if what I would say is that if you're listening and you feel like you've been an outlier your whole life, and you just feel like, you're one of the misfit toys, you didn't play well with they wouldn't let you play the reindeer games. I invite you, and especially if you're somebody who experiences a lot of like unexplainable emotions, thoughts, feelings, where you're just like, why did I wake up feeling so strange and sad? There's nothing in my life that correlates. I really invite you to check out the book and like see if you recognize yourself in it.
Ah, that's what I'm talking about, indeed. That's right, indeed. And if you do identify yourself in it, you found your identity, then you can take on the world.
You
That's right,
can.
indeed.
Yeah. Yeah. Because when we're not taking on everybody else's stuff, then we get to start making choices about what we want to do. Because we can either be absorbing all of the thoughts, feelings, energy, sensations, agony, and misery that is coming from the world around us, and then unfortunately amplifying it and adding to the distress of the world and being yet another hungry mouth that needs to be fed. Or we can start learning how to regulate our nervous systems, calm our systems down, and go towards our joy, go towards our heart's desire, express our creativity, do the things that make us happy and that really feed our soul. And then what we can do is we become anchors, we become beacons for calm, love, and healing in the world. And we become part of the solution instead of amplifying the problem.
That's right. That's right, indeed. Let's not amplify the problems, y'all. That's right, indeed. Amplify a guitar, not the problems. That's right. That's right.
Love your mind, Dom. I love your mind. I also love your voice. I have to say, I imagine many people say this, but oh my God, you have a velvet radio voice. Your voice is the best. And I'm married to a former radio DJ, so I know what I'm talking about.
Sweet. So that means she's a multi-expert, baby. That's right, indeed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's right, indeed. She's got 5 black belts in different areas of expertise. That's right. That's
Yes,
right,
at least
indeed.
5 at this point in time. I've been collecting them for a while.
So that means the other 10 are hidden. I got you.
Yes,
That's right.
exactly. Yeah. Well,
They're
and
hidden
and
in
I mean, there is that thing called humility, I mean, like hubris is kind of it's a little distasteful.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing like a good old taste of arrogance. I'm telling you, it
Ugh.
tastes stronger than strong medicine. That's right. You'll
Yeah.
puke instantly. It's good stuff.
Well, and it just doesn't, it's like, I don't know, like the older I get, the more willing I am to say, I don't have a frickin' clue. Like, it's like anybody who thinks they have the answer. No, it's a our human brain is only like our eyes see, I've heard something like we see 1% of the spectrum of light. We hear an incredibly limited percentage of the band of frequencies of sound. We are only using a small portion of our entire brain. What in God's name makes us think that with the limited capacity of what we've been given, that we have the ability to work with, we know anything conclusively? So I really love to live in the question and just embracing the fact that there is a lot to heaven and earth that is much greater than is dreamt of in my philosophy.
That's right, indeed. That's right. Indeed. You got to love this wealth of knowledge right here. That's right, indeed. We already know you're coming back on this show. So we're coming down to the magical question that every guest gets to receive.
I
And
love
that is
questions. I love unexpected questions. I always feel like I'm on the actor's studio.
Oh yeah, that's right indeed. And the good news is this ain't a trap door. So if you're to wake up tomorrow and you're 25 again, but you're still in the current year, what advice would you give to yourself?
Stop wasting your time trying to prove to people who are skeptical and don't believe you and what you do. You be you, boo. Like, Like, and just, I would say to her, you deserve love. Like, what I would be doing is I would be giving myself permission to do the things that make me happy. I would stop eating sugar. Well, actually, by 25, I'd stopped eating sugar. So by then I was already on that path, but I was still bending over backwards to people please people, especially men who did not deserve my attention or time. And so what I would be doing would be like going for my joy, giving myself permission to just like give zero F's, and to not spend so much time and energy fretting and worrying about what other people were going to think about me. And instead, just like follow my bliss and do the things that really like make me happy, and dump the jerks a hell of a lot faster than I did when I was younger.
That's right. Dump the jerks. Let them be chickens. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right indeed. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. Right. Right indeed. Let them be chickens. Indeed. So you're the right, folks. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. Avoid the people pleasing like the plague. That's right indeed. The three
Yeah.
P's, baby. That's right. People pleasing can be a plague. Avoid it.
Oh, it,
That's right.
yeah, people pleasing. It's the people pleasing plague. And it really is. I mean, oh my God. Like how many times do we stop our joy? Do we curtail ourselves from going for the things that really make us happy because of that desire to to please another person? And I mean, I don't know. I think most people are fairly self-absorbed and self-centered, and a lot of times like they're not going to bend over backwards to meet your needs. Why should you bend over backwards to meet theirs?
Exactly. That's right indeed. Not everybody can have yoga like that. Not everybody does yoga. I'm sure that
Mm-mm.
hurts your back like heck. It's like, oh God, this ain't the pigeon pose. What is this?
Or you hyperextend your shoulder and you really mess yourself up with table, which yeah, I never had any. I did not know that you could injure yourself with yoga until I did. So right there with you.
There we go. That's right indeed. I guess eating crow in more ways than one,
Mhm.
huh?
Or pigeon, or pigeon.
There we go. That's right indeed. And then you'll no longer be a tree. No before any more rabbit holes through nature appear. What's the best way, folks, to stay in contact with you, Jennifer?
So I got it really simple, and I kind of got a system down. You can go to empathicmastery.com to find all things empath and all the things, and that will lead you to being able to join my Facebook group. There, you can find the book, you can find the podcast, you can find all the things at empathicmastery.com. But there's a system. If you really want to go directly, like, do not collect $200 and go directly, instead of go directly into jail, like maybe like leave jail, Empathic Mastery book will take you directly to the page that has all of the resources for the book, including the book internationally and the audiobook and everything. So you can find links for anywhere in the world that you want to buy a copy. So empathicmasterybook.com is where you can get the book. And then if you want to listen to the show, which you guys have heard me talking about my philosophy as a podcast host, empathicmasteryshow.com. See, there's a system. So it's all empathic mastery at the front, and then you just tag on the thing at the second part of it. So empathicmastery.com, empathicmasteryshow.com, and empathicmasterybook.com. And for the people who are interested in learning more about EFT, which we didn't really talk a lot about in this show, you can go to EFTinstruction.com. And the next level 1 and 2 professional training that I'm going to be doing will be starting in March of 2023. And then chances are the next one after that will be in March of 2024. So that is how to reach me.
Woohoo! Well, there you have it, folks. Be like Mr. Fantastic. Stretch your arms all the way around Jennifer's website. Indeed, hug it. That's right. Jump inside, getting all the empathic wares. Indeed, check out all of her wares. Check out her show. Subscribe to it. Check it out like a library book. Share it the empaths in your life. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. And then put on a Care Bear suit for bonus points. That's right, indeed. For extra bonus points, put on a Teletubby suit the following day. And then take selfies with Jennifer's book. That's right, indeed. That's
So
right,
I
indeed. On both days.
literally have have Teletubbies. So I love Care Bears. I love Care Bears. And but I literally have the 4 Teletubbies like figurines like 3 feet away from me on a shelf above me. That's just too perfect. I mean, what grown adult has like Teletubbies in their studio? Seriously.
Teletubbies. Sweet. I guess I'm psychic.
Yeah, you might be.
You're the E, I'm the P.
Yep.
Let me stop. Even though they both had the P's. Somebody gonna say fucking words before we close up shop.
You know, I had an art teacher when I was in junior high school and then in high school who had the best message of all. His name was John Walker, and he was a trumpet player, and which he called a flugelhorn, and he was a character. But one of the things that John always said was, and I'm sort of imagining he's probably on the other side now just because of age wise. So, hey, John, he always said, just do it. He was saying it before Nike took it over. Like he was saying this year, but he was just saying it. Just do it. Just do it. Do it, do it, do it, do it, do it. And I think that especially for those of us who are called to write and even if you're just a reader, and not just a reader, but if you're a reader and you just love books and you love being around them, just do it. So that would be like my final words. Just do it. Care of John Walker.
One of the greatest investments you'll ever make in your lifetime will be using your time, and you did just that. Thanks a bunch for investing your time by listening to this wonderful podcast today. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you really did, do me a solid and leave a review or share this episode with at least 3 people that you think would get some value out of today's content. Advance others to advance yourself.